Imagine the perfect life, dazzling wealth, a beautiful, loving wife, and the promise of a new beginning with a child on the way. But what if that flawless facade shattered in the most public, humiliating way imaginable? Tonight, we delve into a story ripped from the headlines of The Heart, where a powerful millionaire watches his pregnant wife, the woman he swore to cherish, expose his deepest betrayal on a brightly lit stage. This isn't just a tale of infidelity. It's a raw, unflinching look at power, vulnerability, hidden agendas, and the explosive consequences when secrets refuse to stay buried. Prepare for a journey into a world where love and lies collide, and redemption is a path paved with shattered trust. Let's dive in. The air in the grand ballroom of the Astor Hotel was thick with the scent of lilies, expensive perfume, and the faint metallic tang of anticipation. Elias Thorne, CEO of Thorne Industries, a man whose name was synonymous with innovation and immense wealth, adjusted the cuff of his bespoke tuxedo. His smile, practiced and almost reflexive, was fixed on the podium where his wife, Dr. Serafina Thorne, was about to begin her keynote address. Serafina. The name itself was a whisper of elegance, a promise of light. And tonight, she was radiant. Her silk gown, a deep sapphire that shimmered under the chandeliers, draped gracefully over the gentle swell of her belly. At 7 months pregnant, she possessed a luminous quality, an ethereal glow that captivated every eye in the room. Elias felt a familiar surge of pride, a possessive warmth that had, over the past few months, become increasingly tinged with a gnawing unease. He was a man who built empires, negotiated multi-million-dollar deals, and commanded the respect of boardrooms across the globe. Yet, in this moment, a cold knot of dread tightened in his stomach. It wasn't about Serafina's speech. She was a brilliant neuroscientist, articulate and poised. It was about the carefully constructed facade of his life, a masterpiece of illusion that felt perilously close to crumbling. Across the room, nestled among the junior executives and their partners, sat a woman named Lena Petrova. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the elegant silk of her own dress. She was dressed impeccably. A ghost in the crowd, her face a mask of polite interest. But her eyes, sharp and darting, were fixed on Elias, and then on Serafina. Lena's hand, hidden beneath the table, trembled as she clutched a small velvet pouch. Inside, a single, damning photograph. Elias had met Lena 6 months ago at a tech conference in San Francisco. She was a rising star in a rival firm, a cybersecurity expert with a mind as sharp as her wit. Their initial interactions were purely professional, a dance of intellectual sparring that Elias found exhilarating. Serafina, brilliant as she was, often seemed lost in the abstract world of neural pathways and cognitive mapping. Lena, on the other hand, spoke his language, the language of ambition, risk, and immediate gratification. It began subtly. Late-night emails discussing industry trends, then texts exchanging witty observations. Soon the conversations drifted, becoming more personal, more intimate. Elias, a man who had always prided himself on his unwavering loyalty to Serafina, found himself drawn into Lena's orbit with an alarming speed. She was vibrant, direct, and unapologetically ambitious. She saw him, he felt, not just as Elias Thorne, the Titan, but as a man who craved a different kind of challenge, a different kind of spark. The affair had been a reckless plunge into a dangerous abyss. Stolen moments in dimly lit hotel bars, hushed phone calls, clandestine meetings that felt like scenes from a spy novel. Each encounter was a jolt of adrenaline, a dangerous thrill that momentarily eclipsed the quiet comfort of his life with Serafina. He told himself it was just an escape, a temporary deviation. A man of his stature, with his pressures, needed an outlet. He rationalized, He compartmentalized. He lied. To Serafina, to his colleagues, and most dangerously, to himself. But the lies were becoming heavier, more suffocating. Especially after Serafina's joyous announcement 3 months ago. A baby. Their baby. The news had hit Elias with the force of a physical blow, a sudden, jarring reminder of the life he was jeopardizing. He had tried to end things with Lena then, a clumsy, guilt-ridden attempt that Lena, with her shrewd understanding of his vulnerabilities, had deftly sidestepped. She hadn't demanded anything, hadn't threatened. She had simply looked at him with those knowing eyes and said, "Elias, we both know this isn't just about sex. You come alive when you're with me." And he, weak and entangled, had believed her. Now, Serafina stood at the podium, her voice clear and resonant, filling the ballroom. "Good evening, esteemed colleagues, friends, and family," she began, her gaze sweeping across the room, lingering for a moment on Elias, a soft, loving smile gracing her lips. He felt a pang of profound shame, a sharp, visceral ache that cut through his carefully constructed composure. Lena, watching from her table, felt a surge of something akin to triumph, mixed with a bitter resentment. She had known about Serafina's pregnancy. Elias had told her, his voice heavy with a guilt he hadn't shown her before. Lena had feigned understanding, even sympathy, but inside, a cold fury had simmered. She had given him her time, her passion, her unvarnished self. And he was going back to his perfect life, his perfect wife, his perfect family. The injustice of it burned. She had planned this meticulously. For weeks she had been gathering information, piecing together the fragments of Elias's double life. She knew about the Thorn Industries annual gala, a prestigious event where Serafina always delivered a speech. It was the perfect stage, a public humiliation, a spectacle that would forever brand Elias Thorn, the impeccable, the untouchable, as a cheat and a liar, and Serafina, the wronged wife, would be the instrument of his downfall. Serafina was speaking about the future of neuroscience, her passion for understanding the human brain, its complexities, its capacity for both profound connection and devastating betrayal. Elias found himself listening, truly listening, to her words for the first time in months. Her intellect was undeniable, her dedication inspiring. He remembered the early days of their marriage, the vibrant intellectual debates, the shared dreams. Where had they gone? When had the cracks begun to form? Perhaps it was the relentless pressure of his empire, the constant demands on his time and energy. Or perhaps it was his own inherent restlessness, a deep-seated need for novelty and challenge that had, over time, eroded the foundations of his contentment. He had always been a man who sought to conquer, to achieve, to acquire. And somewhere along the way, he had started to view his marriage not as a partnership, but as another possession, something to be maintained rather than nurtured. Serafina paused, taking a sip of water. Her eyes, intelligent and warm, scanned the faces in the audience. Elias saw her gaze drift towards Lena's table, a flicker of something unreadable in her expression. He dismissed it as paranoia. Serafina couldn't possibly know. He had been so careful. But Serafina Thorn was not just a brilliant scientist. She was a woman of keen observation and subtle intuition. The past few months, a quiet disquiet had settled over her. Elias was different. Distant. His phone was always with him, face down. His explanations for late nights were vague. His eyes sometimes held a flicker of something she couldn't quite decipher. She had tried to dismiss it, to attribute it to the stress of his work, or perhaps her own hormonal shifts during pregnancy. But the feeling persisted, a persistent hum beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life. Then, a week ago, a package had arrived at their home. unmarked. Inside, a single high-resolution photograph. Elias, laughing, his arm around a woman. Lena Petrova. The setting was unmistakable, the rooftop bar of the St. Regis in San Francisco, a place Elias had claimed to be attending a late-night client dinner. The date stamp on the photo confirmed it. The world had tilted on its axis for Serafina. The air had left her lungs. The initial shock had given way to a searing pain, then a cold, calculated anger. She had recognized Lena from industry events, a sharp, ambitious woman. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The late nights, the evasive answers, the subtle shift in Elias's demeanor. It all made a terrible, undeniable sense. She hadn't confronted him. Not yet. The betrayal was too raw, too profound, and the pregnancy, her vulnerable state, made her cautious. She needed time to process, to plan. Serafina Thorne was not a woman to crumble. She was a woman who strategized, who analyzed, who, when pushed, could execute with chilling precision. And tonight the stage was set. Serafina's voice, now infused with a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in tone, continued. In neuroscience, we often speak of the brain's incredible capacity for adaptation, for forming new pathways, for learning and unlearning. We explore the intricate dance of neurons, the chemical reactions that govern our emotions, our memories, our very sense of self. She paused, her gaze sweeping the room again, this time with a deliberate, almost predatory slowness. Elias felt a prickle on the back of his neck. This wasn't her usual academic cadence. There was an edge to her voice, a barely contained tremor that hinted at something deeper. But what happens, Serafina continued, her voice gaining strength, when those pathways are corrupted, when the signals are crossed, the connections severed? What happens when the very foundation of trust, the bedrock of human relationships, is eroded by deceit? A hush fell over the ballroom. The polite murmurs ceased. People shifted in their seats, sensing a deviation from the expected script. Elias's heart hammered, a frantic drum against his ribs. He felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. Serafina's eyes, now blazing with an intensity that Elias had never seen directed at him, locked onto his. "We build our lives on trust," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. "On the belief that those we hold dearest will uphold their vows, their promises, their commitment. We believe in the sanctity of shared lives, shared dreams, shared futures." She took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling visibly beneath the sapphire silk. "But sometimes," she went on, her voice now a low, dangerous hum, "the truth is far more complex, far more painful. Sometimes the person you believe knows you best, the person who stands beside you, is the one who has woven a web of lies so intricate, so insidious, that it threatens to unravel everything." Elias felt a wave of nausea. He wanted to run, to disappear, to rewind time. He wanted to scream at her to stop. But he was frozen, trapped in the spotlight of her words, the silent judgment of hundreds of eyes. Lena, at her table, felt a thrill of vindication. This was it. The moment. She watched Elias's face, pale and rigid, a flicker of grim satisfaction crossing her features. He deserved this. He deserved to feel the same pain, the same humiliation he had inflicted. Serafina's hand, delicate and trembling slightly, reached into the inner pocket of her gown. The movement was slow, deliberate, drawing every eye in the room. Elias watched, mesmerized, as she pulled out a single, glossy photograph. The silence in the ballroom was absolute, deafening. You could hear a pin drop. The air crackled with tension. Serafina held the photograph aloft, her gaze still fixed on Elias, a chilling blend of sorrow and defiance in her eyes. The image, blown up to an almost grotesque size, was projected onto the massive screen behind her. It was Elias and Lena, in a passionate embrace. The St. Regis rooftop, San Francisco. The date stamp, clear and damning, was visible to everyone. A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. Whispers erupted, a low, buzzing hum that quickly escalated into shocked exclamations. Elias felt the blood drain from his face. His carefully constructed world imploded in an instant. The perfect life, the perfect marriage, the perfect image, all shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Lena, seeing the image projected, felt a sudden, unexpected jolt of fear. She had wanted this, planned this, but seeing it, so stark, so public, so undeniably real, was different. Her face, which had been a mask of triumph, now contorted into a grimace of horror. She was exposed too. She was the mistress, the other woman, branded for all to see. Serafina's voice, though trembling, cut through the rising din. "This," she said, her voice cracking slightly, but her eyes never leaving Elias's, "is the truth. The truth of a man who built an empire on trust, but destroyed his own home with lies." Then her gaze shifted, sweeping past Elias, past the stunned faces of the audience, and landed squarely on Lena Petrova. Lena froze. Serafina's eyes, filled with a raw, visceral pain, were like twin lasers, piercing through her carefully constructed anonymity. The spotlight, it seemed, had found its second target. "And this," Serafina continued, her voice now laced with a chilling contempt, "is the woman who helped him do it. The woman who knowingly, willingly participated in the destruction of a family, the betrayal of a wife, and the shattering of a future, even as a new life was growing within me." Lena felt every eye in the room turn to her. The whispers intensified, morphing into a cacophony of judgment. She felt a burning flush creep up her neck, her cheeks. The elegant ballroom, moments ago a symbol of her ambition, now felt like a suffocating cage. The lilies, once fragrant, now seemed to mock her with their purity. She wanted to disappear, to vanish into thin air. Her carefully curated image, her professional reputation, her very sense of self were crumbling around her. Public shame, raw and unyielding, washed over her in a suffocating wave. Without a word, Lena Petrova pushed back her chair, the screech of metal against marble echoing in the stunned silence. Her eyes, wide with panic and humiliation, darted around the room. She saw the disgust, the pity, the outright condemnation in the faces of the people who, moments ago, had been her peers. She scrambled to her feet, her silk dress rustling loudly. Her purse, clutched in her trembling hand, slipped and fell, scattering its contents across the polished floor. A lipstick? A compact? A few crumpled bills? She didn't care. All she wanted was to escape. With a desperate animalistic urge, Lena pushed through the tables, stumbling over chairs, ignoring the shocked gasps and murmurs that followed her. Her heels clicked frantically on the marble floor as she half ran, half stumbled towards the grand double doors at the back of the ballroom. Elias, still rooted to the spot, watched her go, a hollow ache in his chest. He saw the raw terror in her eyes, the desperate flight. And in that moment, for the first time, he felt a flicker of something beyond his own shame, a chilling realization of the collateral damage he had wrought. The doors swung shut behind Lena with a soft thud, leaving behind an echoing silence. All eyes returned to Serafina. She stood at the podium, her body trembling, her hand still clutching the damning photograph. Her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes, though brimming with pain, held a fierce, unyielding resolve. "I stand before you tonight," Serafina said, her voice now a raw whisper, but amplified by the microphone. Not as a victim, but as a woman who refuses to be silenced, a woman who refuses to let lies define her truth. She let the photograph fall from her hand. It fluttered to the ground, landing face up, a stark reminder of the betrayal. "This," Serafina continued, her voice gaining strength with each word, is not the end of my story. It is merely the painful, necessary beginning of a new chapter." She looked directly at Elias, her eyes filled with a profound, heartbreaking sorrow. "And as for you, Elias," she said, her voice clear and strong, "may your empire crumble as swiftly as your lies have been exposed." With that, Seraphina Thorne turned, her sapphire gown swirling around her, and walked slowly, deliberately, off the stage. The applause that followed was not polite or perfunctory. It was a roar of shock, of sympathy, of admiration, and of outrage. Elias Thorne stood alone, bathed in the harsh glare of the ballroom lights, the shattered fragments of his life scattered around him. The air, once thick with anticipation, now reeked of ruin. This was just the beginning. The silence that followed Seraphina's exit was more deafening than any applause. Elias Thorne remained rooted to the spot, a statue of public disgrace. The ballroom, moments ago a vibrant tableau of power and prestige, had transformed into a gaping maw of judgment. Faces, once deferential, now stared with a mixture of shock, pity, and outright condemnation. He saw old colleagues, business rivals, even his own board members, their expressions ranging from grim disapproval to barely concealed schadenfreude. His phone, forgotten in his pocket, vibrated incessantly. He knew without looking that it was his PR team, his legal counsel, his furious board. The empire he had meticulously built, brick by gilded brick, was not just crumbling. It was imploding in a spectacular, very public fashion. A junior executive, a young man named Ben Carter, who had always looked up to Elias with almost reverent admiration, approached him cautiously. "Mr. Thorne, are you all right?" Elias looked at him, his eyes vacant, unseeing. He tried to speak, but his throat was dry, constricted by a tightening band of shame. He could only manage a hoarse whisper. "Get me out of here." Ben, looking uncomfortable but dutiful, quickly ushered him towards a side exit, away from the main doors where the media, alerted by the sudden commotion, were undoubtedly gathering like vultures. As they moved, Elias caught snippets of conversation, fragments of his shattered reputation. Unbelievable audacity. Pregnant too. The poor woman. Thorne Industries' stock will plummet. Outside, the cool night air offered no solace. It only seemed to amplify the ringing in his ears, the frantic beating of his heart. A black town car, his usual ride, was waiting. He slumped into the leather seat, feeling every ounce of strength drained from his body. "Home, Mr. Thorne?" Ben asked, his voice hesitant. Elias closed his eyes. Home. The sprawling mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, a testament to his success, now felt like a mausoleum. "No," he rasped, "to the office. I need to fix this." But even as he spoke the words, he knew. Some things couldn't be fixed. The image of Seraphina's tear-streaked face, her eyes blazing with the pain he had inflicted, was burned into his mind. And the photograph. The damning, undeniable photograph. Meanwhile, Lena Petrova burst out of the Astor, gasping for air, her lungs burning. The cool night wind whipped around her, but it did little to extinguish the fire of humiliation that raged through her veins. She hailed the first vacant taxi she saw, her voice choked as she gave her address, a chic, minimalist apartment in downtown Manhattan. Inside the cab, she pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through social media. It was already everywhere. News alerts, Twitter feeds exploding with the hashtag Jock Thorne Affair. Memes, cruel and immediate, were already being generated. Her face, blurred but recognizable, was already being shared, labeled the Mistress. A wave of nausea hit her, stronger than the initial shock. She had wanted to expose Elias, to make him pay. But she hadn't fully anticipated the blowback, the public shaming that would inevitably fall on her too. She was a professional, a rising star in a cutthroat industry. Her reputation, meticulously cultivated over years, was now in tatters. "Bitch," she muttered, not at Elias, but at Serafina. She planned this. She knew. She wanted to destroy me too. The initial thrill of vindication had curdled into bitter regret. She had played a dangerous game, and she had lost more than she had won. Her phone rang. It was her boss, a stern, no-nonsense woman named Eleanor Vance. Lena knew what was coming. She let it go to voicemail. Then another call. From a colleague, then another. The notifications piled up. A digital avalanche of her ruined life. She arrived at her apartment, the sanctuary she had so carefully crafted, and collapsed onto her pristine white sofa. The velvet pouch, still clutched in her hand, felt heavy, accusatory. She had been so sure, so confident in her plan. She had orchestrated the delivery of the photograph to Serafina, ensuring it would land just days before the gala. She had even planted a few subtle hints, a breadcrumb trail for Serafina to follow, making sure the wife would connect the dots. She had wanted to be the catalyst, the unseen hand of justice. But Serafina had turned the weapon back on her. Tears, hot and angry, streamed down Lena's face. She wasn't crying for Elias or for the affair. She was crying for herself, for the ambition that had driven her, for the ruthless calculation that had backfired so spectacularly. She had wanted power, recognition. She had seen Elias Thorne as a stepping stone, a means to an end. She had convinced herself that their connection was real, that he saw something special in her, something Serafina couldn't offer. But in the end, she was just another casualty in his gilded life, and now, a public pariah. Back at the Thorne mansion, Serafina had dismissed her driver. She walked through the grand foyer, the silence of the house pressing in on her. The air was still, heavy with unspoken truths. She reached the master bedroom, a cavernous space filled with expensive furniture and a lingering scent of Elias's cologne. It felt alien, hostile. She peeled off the sapphire gown, letting it drop to the floor in a shimmering puddle. Her reflection in the full-length mirror showed a woman both fragile and formidable. Her eyes, though red-rimmed, held a steely glint. The gentle curve of her belly was a stark reminder of the innocent life she carried, a life that deserved more than a foundation built on deceit. The public exposure had been a desperate, impulsive act, born of a pain so profound it had threatened to consume her. But it had also been calculated. She knew Elias. He thrived on reputation, on control. To strip him of that in front of his peers was the only way to truly make him feel the weight of his actions. It was a gamble, a dangerous one, but she had felt she had no other choice. To suffer in silence, to confront him privately and allow him to spin his lies, was unthinkable. She needed the world to bear witness. She sank onto the edge of the bed, her hands resting protectively over her abdomen. The baby. Her priority now. Everything else was secondary. The marriage, the wealth, the shattered illusion of their life. It all paled in comparison to the tiny heartbeat within her. She pulled out her own phone. The messages were pouring in. Friends, colleagues, even distant relatives. Messages of shock, support, outrage. She ignored them all. She needed to speak to one person only. Her older sister, Clara. Clara Davies was a family lawyer, sharp, pragmatic, and fiercely protective. She had always been Serafina's rock, the steady anchor in her sometimes turbulent life. "Clara," Serafina said, her voice hoarse when her sister finally answered. "Serafina, my God, are you all right? I just saw the news. What happened? Are you safe?" Clara's voice was a torrent of concern and disbelief. "I'm fine, Clara. The baby's fine," Serafina said, her voice gaining a little strength. "I exposed Elias, at the gala. Everything." A stunned silence on the other end. Then Clara's voice, calmer now, but laced with a new, dangerous edge. "You did what? Serafina, are you out of your mind? Do you know the implications of this? The media frenzy, the legal ramifications." "I know," Serafina interrupted, her voice firm. "I know all of it. But I couldn't live with the lie anymore. I couldn't let him get away with it. Not when I'm carrying his child." Clara sighed, a long, weary sound. All right, I understand. Or at least I'm trying to. What do you need, Sarah?" "Anything." "I need you here," Serafina said, a tremor entering her voice despite her resolve. "Tomorrow morning. We need to talk about divorce and protecting my future and the babies." "I'll be on the first train," Clara said, her voice already shifting into professional mode. "Don't talk to anyone. Don't answer any calls, especially not Elias. I'll handle everything." Serafina hung up, a fragile sense of relief washing over her. She wasn't alone. She had Clara. And she had the unwavering conviction that she had done the right thing, no matter how painful, no matter how public. She walked over to the window, looking out at the sprawling, manicured lawns of the estate. The moon cast long, eerie shadows across the perfect landscape. This gilded cage, once a symbol of her dreams, now felt like a prison. But she would break free, for herself, and for the life growing within her. Meanwhile, Elias had arrived at Thorn Industries headquarters, a sleek, imposing skyscraper that dominated the city skyline. The building was usually a hive of activity, even late at night, but tonight it felt eerily quiet. His executive assistant, a perpetually flustered woman named Brenda, met him in the deserted lobby, her face pale with worry. "Mr. Thorne, the board is on an emergency video conference. Mr. Harrison is furious, and the media, it's a circus out there." Elias nodded, his jaw clenched. He knew Harrison, the formidable chairman of the board, would be incandescent with rage. Harrison had been a mentor, a father figure, and a shrewd businessman who valued reputation above all else. He walked into the executive boardroom, the large screen already displaying the grim faces of his board members. Harrison, his face a thundercloud, spoke first. "Elias," he began, his voice low and dangerous. "What in God's name was that? Do you have any idea what you've done? Our stock is in freefall. Our reputation is in tatters. This is a public relations catastrophe of epic proportions." Elias took a deep breath, trying to steady his voice. "I understand, Mr. Harrison. I take full responsibility. It was an unfortunate personal matter that spilled into the public domain." "Unfortunate personal matter?" Another board member, a sharp-featured woman named Eleanor Vance, Lena's boss, scoffed. "You cheated on your pregnant wife, Elias, on stage, and dragged one of our most promising young executives, Ms. Petrova, into the public eye as your mistress. Do you have any idea the damage this does to our corporate image? To our ethics?" Elias felt a fresh wave of humiliation. "I assure you, I am taking steps to rectify the situation. I will issue a public apology, address the media." "An apology won't cut it, Elias," Harrison interjected, his voice chillingly calm. "The market has already reacted. Our investors are panicking. We've lost billions in market capitalization in the last hour alone. This isn't just a personal scandal, it's a corporate crisis." The discussion devolved into a heated debate about damage control, legal strategies, and the inevitable impact on Thorn Industries' future projects. Elias sat through it all, his mind numb, listening to the dissection of his life, his career, his very identity. He was no longer the visionary CEO. He was the disgraced husband, the reckless philanderer. He knew what was coming. The whispers had already begun. The calls for his resignation. The board, ever pragmatic, would prioritize the company's survival over his personal reputation. As the meeting concluded, Harrison remained on the screen, his gaze piercing. "Elias," he said, his voice softening slightly. "I'm deeply disappointed. I thought you were better than this." We all did. Elias could only nod, the weight of Harrison's disappointment heavier than any financial loss. He spent the rest of the night in his office, the city lights twinkling outside the panoramic windows like indifferent stars. He tried to craft a statement, to formulate a plan, but his mind was a chaotic storm of guilt, anger, and despair. He thought of Serafina, her fierce eyes, her shattered trust. He thought of Lena, fleeing in shame, her career likely ruined. He had destroyed so much, and for what? A fleeting thrill, a desperate attempt to fill a void he hadn't even recognized until it was too late. The power imbalance he had wielded so effortlessly, the control he had always exerted over his life and those around him, had vanished in a single, explosive moment. He was no longer the puppet master. He was the puppet, dangling helplessly in the unforgiving glare of public scrutiny. He finally leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair, feeling the exhaustion deep in his bones. The silence of the office was broken only by the hum of the computers and the distant wail of a siren. He had built an empire, but he had lost his soul. And the road to redemption, if one even existed, seemed impossibly long and fraught with pain. He closed his eyes, the image of Serafina, pregnant and defiant, flashing behind his eyelids. He had underestimated her, severely, and now he would pay the price. The dawn broke over New York City, painting the skyline in hues of bruised purple and gray, a fitting backdrop to the turmoil that had engulfed Elias Thorne. He hadn't slept. The board meeting had stretched into the early hours, a brutal, relentless interrogation that culminated in the inevitable. "Effective immediately, Elias. You are on a leave of absence." Mr. Harrison's voice had been devoid of emotion, a pronouncement of corporate death. "A temporary CEO will be appointed. We need to stabilize the market, reassure our investors. This is a necessary step to protect Thorne Industries." Elias had listened, numb. He knew leave of absence was a euphemism for being stripped of his power, a polite way of saying he was being sidelined, perhaps permanently. His empire, the very extension of his identity, was being wrestled from his grasp. The gilded cage had not only shattered, but its bars had turned into a prison. He walked out of the office building into a maelstrom. Paparazzi, news vans, reporters shouting his name, cameras flashing like strobe lights. He shielded his face, his security detail forming a protective wedge around him, pushing through the aggressive throng. Every shouted question was a barb, every flash a reminder of his public humiliation. "Mr. Thorne, any comment on your wife's accusations? Is it true you're being forced out of Thorne Industries? Where is Ms. Petrova?" He made it to his car, feeling like a hunted animal. The world, once at his feet, was now baying for his blood. He had always controlled the narrative, dictated the terms. Now, he was merely a character in a scandal, a cautionary tale. Back at the mansion, the silence was oppressive. Elias paced the vast living room, the Persian rugs feeling alien beneath his feet. His phone, once a lifeline, was now a source of dread. Calls from concerned friends, from furious business partners, from his bewildered parents who had seen the news. He ignored them all. He felt a profound, suffocating loneliness. He thought of Serafina. The sheer audacity of her act, the courage it must have taken. He had always seen her as brilliant, yes, but also gentle, perhaps even a little naive about the cutthroat world he inhabited. He had underestimated her capacity for strategic retaliation, for public defiance. He had seen her as an extension of his perfect life, not as an independent force capable of such devastating action. This was the true power imbalance, not his wealth over her intellect, but her moral clarity over his moral compromise. He poured himself a glass of amber liquid, the familiar burn of the scotch doing little to numb the gnawing emptiness. He was a man who had always sought control, who had meticulously planned every move. Yet in his personal life, he had allowed himself to drift, to succumb to fleeting desires, believing his power would insulate him from consequences. He had been wrong. Terribly, catastrophically wrong. The psychological conflict within him was a tempest. Shame warred with anger, regret with a stubborn refusal to fully accept blame. He still harbored a flicker of resentment towards Serafina. How could she do this to him? To them? To their child? He clung to the victim narrative, even as the world condemned him. This was his coping mechanism, a desperate attempt to shield his fragile ego from the full force of his culpability. Hours later, Clara Davies arrived at the Thorne mansion, her face grim but resolute. She found Serafina in the sunroom, sipping herbal tea, a legal pad filled with meticulous notes beside her. Serafina looked exhausted, but there was a quiet strength in her eyes that Clara recognized. "Sarah," Clara said, embracing her sister tightly. "I'm so sorry. Are you really okay?" "I will be," Serafina replied, her voice soft but firm. "The baby is fine. That's all that matters." Clara pulled up a chair, her lawyer's mind already racing. "All right, let's talk strategy. This is going to be messy, Sarah, very messy. Elias will fight. He has unlimited resources." "Let him," Serafina said, a flicker of something cold in her eyes. "He has money. I have the truth. And I have you." They spent the morning dissecting the situation. Clara outlined the legal complexities of a high-profile divorce, especially with a child on the way. Serafina, with her scientific precision, laid out her expectations. Full custody, a fair division of assets, and a public acknowledgement of Elias's infidelity that would protect her reputation and ensure the baby's future was secure, untainted by scandal. "Why the public exposure, Sarah?" Clara asked gently, though she suspected the answer. "It was dramatic. And it put you in the spotlight, too." Serafina looked out at the sprawling gardens, a faint smile touching her lips. "Because Elias understands only one language, Clara. Power. And public image. To hurt him where it truly matters, I had to strip him of both. A private confrontation would have been swept under the rug, another secret he could control. This way the world knows. There's no turning back." "And Lena Petrova?" Clara probed. "Did you intend to expose her too?" Serafina hesitated, her gaze hardening slightly. "She knowingly participated. She knew he was married, knew I was pregnant. She played a part in this destruction. Let her face the consequences of her choices, just as Elias will face his." There was a cold, quiet justice in her tone. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about accountability. Serafina's hidden motive wasn't simply to humiliate Elias, but to ensure that his actions had undeniable, public repercussions, setting a precedent for her own future and that of her child. She wanted to reclaim her narrative, to be seen not as a wronged wife, but as a woman who fought for her truth. Clara nodded, understanding. Her sister was not just intelligent, she was formidable. "All right, I'll start drafting the papers. We'll need to prepare for a media onslaught, and Elias will likely try to discredit you, to paint you as unstable, emotional, especially given the pregnancy." "Let him try," Serafina said, placing a hand on her belly. "My strength comes from here now. He has no idea." The emotional shifts were slow, almost imperceptible. Serafina was moving from the raw pain of betrayal to a quiet, steely resolve. The vulnerability of her pregnancy was paradoxically making her stronger, more focused. She was no longer just Serafina Thorne, the brilliant neuroscientist, or Elias Thorne's wife. She was becoming Serafina, the mother, the survivor, forging a new path for herself and her child. Miles away, in her minimalist apartment, Lena Petrova was experiencing a different kind of unraveling. The initial shock had given way to a burning, corrosive anger. She had been fired. Eleanor Vance had called her, her voice frigid, informing her that her services were no longer required. Her reputation in the tech world, once pristine, was now irrevocably tainted. She paced her apartment, a caged animal. Her phone buzzed with hate messages, anonymous threats, and the relentless echo of the public scorn. She had become a pariah overnight. "It's all her fault," Lena muttered, her voice hoarse. "That self-righteous bitch! She set me up. She used me to destroy him, and then she threw me under the bus." Her hidden motive for the affair, beyond the thrill and the ambition, had been a desperate yearning for validation, for a connection with someone she perceived as powerful and successful. She had grown up in a modest family, always striving, always fighting for every inch of success. Elias, with his effortless charm and immense wealth, had seemed like the ultimate prize, a shortcut to the life she craved. She had convinced herself that she was special to him, that their connection transcended the superficial. The public exposure had stripped away that illusion, revealing the brutal truth. She was merely a pawn in a larger game, discarded when no longer useful. But Lena Petrova was not one to wallow in self-pity for long. The shame was suffocating, yes, but beneath it, a spark of her old ambition, twisted and distorted by rage, began to flicker. She had lost everything, her career, her reputation, her carefully constructed future. But she still had her intellect, her cunning, and she had a burning desire for revenge. She thought of Elias, the way he had looked, pale and stunned, as Serafina exposed him. A flicker of grim satisfaction. He deserved it. But Serafina deserved to pay too. She had not only exposed Elias, but she had deliberately, publicly, destroyed Lena. Lena walked over to her laptop, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She had always been adept at finding vulnerabilities, at exploiting weaknesses. She had access to a vast network of information, a digital underworld she had navigated for years in her cybersecurity work. A new, dangerous plan began to form in her mind. Not just revenge, but redemption, on her own terms. She would find a way to turn this humiliation into an advantage. She would expose Serafina, reveal the cracks in her perfect facade, the hidden motives behind her seemingly noble act. She would prove that Serafina Thorne was not the innocent victim she portrayed herself to be. The morally complex characters were beginning to emerge. Elias, the powerful man brought low, grappling with his own denial and anger. Serafina, the wronged wife, wielding her pain as a weapon, her actions driven by a complex mix of justice, protection, and perhaps a touch of calculated cruelty. And Lena, the ambitious mistress, now a disgraced pariah, her shame transforming into a dangerous thirst for retribution. The stage was set for a new kind of battle, one fought not in boardrooms or on public stages, but in the shadows, where hidden motives would be unearthed, and the true cost of betrayal would be paid. The unraveling had begun, and no one would emerge unscathed. The days following the gala blurred into a suffocating haze for Elias Thorne. The sprawling mansion, once a symbol of his achievement, had become a gilded prison. He was under house arrest, not by law, but by shame and the relentless glare of the media. His phone, once a constant companion, now lay silent, or buzzed only with the insistent calls from his legal team and the few remaining loyalists at Thorne Industries, all delivering grim updates. The stock continued to plummet, major deals were being pulled, and his name, once whispered with reverence, was now synonymous with scandal. His initial anger at Serafina had begun to curdle into a bitter, self-pitying despair. He paced the empty rooms, the silence broken only by the echo of his own footsteps. He tried to work to immerse himself in the complex spreadsheets and market analyses that had once defined his existence. But his mind refused to focus. The image of Serafina, pregnant and defiant, was a constant haunting presence. He tried to call her, his fingers fumbling with the keys. He needed to explain, to apologize, to somehow salvage what was left. But her number was blocked. He tried her assistant, her parents, even Clara. All calls went unanswered. The wall she had erected was impenetrable. His days dissolved into a routine of self-destruction. He drank heavily, the scotch a temporary balm against the gnawing emptiness. He ate little, slept less, haunted by nightmares of public humiliation and professional ruin. His once impeccable appearance deteriorated. Stubble shadowed his jaw, his eyes were bloodshot, and his expensive suits hung loosely on his increasingly gaunt frame. His psychological conflict deepened. He vacillated between blaming Serafina for her cruelty and Lena for her recklessness, and fleeting moments of agonizing self-awareness where he acknowledged his own culpability. But the latter were fleeting, quickly drowned out by the louder voices of denial and resentment. He was Elias Thorne, the man who always won, who always controlled. This loss of control was an existential threat, chipping away at his very identity. He felt like a king dethroned, stripped of his crown and left to wander in the wilderness of his own making. His board, under Mr. Harrison's stern guidance, had appointed an interim CEO, a seasoned but uncharismatic veteran from within the company. Elias was effectively out, his name still on the door, but his power evaporated. He was a ghost in his own empire. The power imbalance had shifted dramatically, leaving him powerless, adrift. For Serafina, the days were a whirlwind of legal meetings, media management, and doctor's appointments. Clara had moved into the mansion, transforming a guest room into a temporary war room. The house, once filled with the ghosts of Elias's presence, now hummed with a different energy, one of female solidarity and strategic planning. The media was relentless. Paparazzi camped outside the gates, tabloids screamed headlines, and every news channel dissected the Thorne scandal. Clara, with her legal acumen and media savvy, became Serafina's shield. She issued carefully worded statements, deflected intrusive questions, and ensured Serafina's privacy was maintained as much as possible. Serafina, though exhausted, found a strange sense of liberation in the chaos. The public exposure had been a catharsis, a painful but necessary cleansing. She was no longer living a lie. The emotional toll was immense, the grief for her shattered marriage a constant ache, but beneath it, a new resilience was forming. She focused on the baby, her growing belly a tangible reminder of the future she was fighting for. Prenatal yoga, healthy meals, long walks in the secluded parts of the estate. These became her anchors. She met with her own legal team, a formidable group assembled by Clara. They meticulously documented Elias's assets, prepared for the divorce proceedings, and strategized on how to secure the best possible outcome for Serafina and the child. The discussions were cold, clinical, devoid of emotion. It was a business transaction now, a dismantling of a life that had once held so much promise. One afternoon, a package arrived. Unmarked, just like the one containing the photo of Elias and Lena. Inside, a small, intricately carved wooden bird. Serafina recognized it immediately. It was a replica of a bird she had admired years ago in a small artisan shop in Florence, a place she and Elias had visited on their honeymoon. She had mentioned it to him once, fleetingly. He had forgotten. Or so she thought. The bird was accompanied by a single, unsigned note. Some secrets are buried deeper than others, even the ones you think you've forgotten. Serafina frowned. It wasn't from Elias. The handwriting was unfamiliar, elegant, but with a sharp, almost aggressive slant. It felt like a threat, a warning, or perhaps a clue. Her scientific mind, always seeking patterns and connections, began to whir. Who would send her this? And why? Was it related to Elias, or something else entirely? The note hinted at a hidden motive, a deeper layer to the betrayal she had just exposed. Clara dismissed it as a crank sender, a byproduct of the media frenzy, but Serafina couldn't shake the feeling that it was something more, a subtle tremor beneath the surface of the already turbulent waters. Lena Petrova, meanwhile, was meticulously planning her counterattack. The shame of public humiliation had festered, transforming into a cold, burning rage. She had lost everything: her job, her reputation, her carefully constructed future. And she blamed Serafina. She had retreated into her apartment, cutting off all contact with the outside world. Her initial despair had given way to a chilling clarity. She would not be a victim. She would not let Serafina Thorne, the perfect wife, emerge from this unscathed. Lena was a cybersecurity expert, a master of digital forensics. She knew how to find information, how to exploit vulnerabilities. She began by digging into Serafina's past, not just her public persona as a brilliant neuroscientist, but her personal history. She scoured public records, social media archives, academic databases. She looked for inconsistencies, for hidden narratives, for anything that could chip away at Serafina's flawless image. Her hidden motive was no longer just revenge. It was a desperate attempt at self-preservation, a twisted form of redemption. If she could expose Serafina as something less than perfect, less than the innocent victim she portrayed, perhaps Lena could reclaim some of her own lost standing. It was a morally complex path, driven by a desire to deflect blame and inflict pain. She found nothing immediately damning. Serafina's public life was impeccably clean. Her academic record was stellar, her charitable work extensive, her personal life seemingly unblemished. But Lena was patient. She knew that everyone had secrets, especially those who presented such a polished facade. She delved deeper, using her specialized skills to access less public databases, old university records, even obscure forums where Serafina might have left a digital footprint years ago. It was tedious, painstaking work, fueled by coffee and a burning desire for retribution. Then she found it. A series of old encrypted emails from Serafina's university days, dating back almost 15 years. They were to a private, anonymous forum discussing a highly sensitive, ethically questionable research project. The subject matter was vague, coded, but the tone was urgent, bordering on desperate. Serafina, then a promising young researcher, seemed to be involved in something she deeply regretted, something that had been meticulously buried. Lena's heart pounded. This was it, the crack in the perfect facade, the hidden motive she had been searching for. This wasn't about Elias's affair anymore. This was about Serafina's past, a potential scandal that could overshadow the current one. She began the painstaking process of decrypting the emails, her fingers flying across the keyboard, her mind alight with a dangerous excitement. The more she uncovered, the clearer it became. Serafina Thorne, the paragon of virtue, had a secret, a dark one. And Lena Petrova, the disgraced mistress, was about to expose it. The war had just begun. And this time, it wouldn't be fought on a public stage, but in the shadows, where secrets festered and reputations could be destroyed with a single, damning revelation. The morally complex characters were now fully engaged in a battle where no one was truly innocent, and the lines between victim and villain blurred irrevocably. Lena Petrova's fingers flew across the keyboard, her eyes glued to the screen, a triumphant, almost manic grin spreading across her face. The encrypted emails had yielded their secrets. What she uncovered was far more explosive than she could have imagined. The secret wasn't about a past affair or a minor academic transgression. It was about a groundbreaking, yet ethically dubious research project Serafina Thorne had been involved in during her doctoral studies at a prestigious university in Boston. The project, funded by a shadowy biotech firm, involved early-stage human gene editing, specifically targeting cognitive enhancement in children. The emails detailed a series of experiments that skirted, and in some cases outright violated, ethical guidelines. There were mentions of unforeseen complications, unstable outcomes, and a desperate scramble to cover up the results when the primary subject, a young boy, began to exhibit severe, irreversible neurological damage. Serafina, then a brilliant but ambitious young researcher, had been deeply involved. The emails showed her initial enthusiasm, then a growing unease, and finally a frantic effort to distance herself from the project when its true, horrifying implications became clear. The firm had buried the research, silencing the team with NDAs and threats, and the child's family had been compensated handsomely, their silence bought. Serafina had escaped, her name untarnished, her career soaring, but the guilt, Lena surmised, must have been a crushing weight. This was it. The ultimate weapon. A scandal that would not only eclipse Elias's infidelity, but would expose Serafina as a morally compromised scientist, a participant in a horrifying experiment. It would shatter her image as the virtuous victim, revealing a past far darker than any marital betrayal. Lena felt a surge of intoxicating power. This wasn't just revenge, it was a chance to reclaim her narrative, to prove that Serafina was no saint. She began to compile the evidence, meticulously organizing the emails, cross-referencing dates and names, building an undeniable case. She planned to leak it, anonymously at first, to a prominent investigative journalist known for their ruthless pursuit of truth. The world would see Serafina Thorne for who she truly was. Elias Thorne had hit rock bottom. The mansion felt like a tomb, his days a blur of alcohol-induced stupor and self-loathing. His legal team had informed him that Serafina was seeking a significant portion of his assets and full custody of the child. The thought of losing his child, of being completely cut off from the only pure thing left in his life, was a searing pain. One evening, staring out at the rain-streaked windows, a moment of stark clarity pierced through the haze of his despair. He saw himself, truly saw himself, for the first time in years. The relentless pursuit of wealth, the endless striving for more, the casual disregard for the emotional cost of his actions. He had been so consumed by his own desires, his own perceived needs, that he had become blind to the needs of those he claimed to love. He thought of Serafina, her quiet strength, her unwavering integrity. He thought of the early days of their marriage, when they had built their life on shared values, on mutual respect. He had betrayed all of it. He had taken her love, her trust, and trampled on them for a fleeting, meaningless distraction. The anger he had harbored towards her began to dissipate, replaced by a profound, agonizing regret. He had been so focused on his own humiliation that he hadn't truly grasped the depth of her pain, the magnitude of her betrayal. He had broken her. And now she was fighting back, not out of malice, but out of a desperate need to protect herself and their child. A call came through from his former head of security, a grizzled veteran named Frank Miller, who had remained fiercely loyal. "Mr. Thorne?" Frank's voice was low, urgent. "My contacts are picking up chatter. Lena Petrova. She's digging. Something big. About Dr. Thorne's past, university days." Elias felt a jolt of adrenaline. Lena. He had dismissed her, forgotten her in his own misery. But she was still out there, a loose cannon, capable of immense damage. And if she was digging into Serafina's past, it could only mean one thing: more scandal, more destruction. A new kind of fear gripped him, not for his reputation, but for Serafina, and for their child. He knew Serafina was a private person, that she guarded her past fiercely. If Lena found something truly damaging, it could destroy her, and by extension, impact their child. He had to stop Lena. Not to protect himself, but to prevent further devastation. This was the first glimmer of genuine redemption, a shift from self-pity to a nascent desire to protect, to atone. Serafina, despite her outward composure, felt a growing sense of unease. The anonymous note with the wooden bird, the subtle shifts in Clara's usually unflappable demeanor when discussing her past, and a few cryptic messages from old university acquaintances had all coalesced into a chilling realization. Someone was digging. Someone was close to unearthing her most carefully guarded secret. She hadn't spoken of it to anyone. Not even Clara. The gene editing project had been the darkest chapter of her life, a period of youthful ambition gone horribly wrong. A moral stain she had meticulously scrubbed from her public record. The guilt had been a constant companion, a silent burden she carried. She had built her career on ethical research, on healing, as a penance for her past mistakes. Now, it was threatening to resurface. And she knew exactly who was behind it. Lena Petrova. The Mistress, seeking her own twisted form of revenge. Serafina felt a wave of despair. Just as she was beginning to rebuild her life, just as she was finding strength in her vulnerability, this ghost from her past threatened to consume her. How could she protect her child from this? How could she explain such a horrific secret? She knew she had to act. She couldn't let Lena control the narrative, distort the truth. She had to confront it, on her own terms, before it exploded in her face. The confrontation happened not in a public forum, but in the sterile, hushed environment of a private mediation room, arranged by their respective legal teams. It was meant to be about divorce settlements, but the air crackled with unspoken tension, with hidden motives and simmering resentments. Elias, looking gaunt but with a new, unsettling clarity in his eyes, sat opposite Serafina. She looked tired, but her resolve was palpable. Lena Petrova was not present, but her shadow loomed large. "Serafina," Elias began, his voice raspy. "I know you won't believe me, but I am truly sorry. For everything. For the affair. For the humiliation. For the pain I've caused you. I was lost. I lost sight of what truly mattered." Serafina looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Your apologies are too late, Elias, and they ring hollow. You chose your path." "I know," he conceded, his gaze dropping. "But there's something else. Lena. She's digging into your past, Sarah. Something from your university days. Frank's contacts are hearing things. It sounds serious." Serafina's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. He knew. "How?" "She's trying to destroy you," Elias continued, his voice urgent. "To expose something. I don't know what it is, but I can help you stop her. I can use my resources, my connections." "Why, Elias?" Serafina interrupted, her voice sharp. "Why would you help me now, after everything?" He looked at her, his eyes filled with a raw, undeniable sincerity that surprised even himself. "Because, Serafina," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "despite everything, you are the mother of my child. And that child deserves a mother who is protected, who is not dragged through another public scandal. I may have destroyed our marriage, but I won't let her destroy your life or our child's future." It was a fragile, unexpected moment of connection, a sliver of the man she had once loved, buried beneath layers of arrogance and betrayal, seemed to emerge. His desire for redemption, however nascent, was tangible. Serafina hesitated. This was a morally complex choice, to accept help from the man who had betrayed her, to align with him against the woman who had helped expose him. But the threat was real, and the secret, if exposed, would be devastating. "What do you know?" Serafina asked, her voice low. "What exactly is she looking for?" Elias recounted what Frank had told him, piecing together the fragments. Something about a research project, gene editing, A child. Serafina closed her eyes, a shudder running through her. He knew. Or at least, he was close to knowing. The truth, it seemed, was determined to surface, no matter how deeply buried. "I can help you, Sarah," Elias reiterated, his voice firm. "I owe you that much. Let me help you contain this." The psychological conflict raged within Serafina. Could she trust him? Could she allow him back into her life, even in this limited capacity? But the stakes were too high. Her child's future, her reputation as a scientist, her very peace of mind. "All right, Elias," Serafina finally said, her voice barely audible. "Tell me what you propose. And understand this is not about us. This is about protecting our child. Nothing more." Elias nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes. The path to reckoning was long and arduous, but for the first time in weeks, he felt a purpose beyond his own despair. The seeds of redemption, however faint, had been sown in the fertile ground of shared fear and a fragile, unexpected alliance. The war for reputation and truth was about to escalate, with new, unexpected players on both sides. The meeting between Elias, Serafina, and Lena Petrova was arranged by Elias's security team in a neutral, discreet location, a private conference room in a downtown office building, far from the prying eyes of the media. The air was thick with tension, a palpable animosity that crackled between the three individuals whose lives had become so irrevocably intertwined. Lena entered, her face a mask of defiant hostility. She carried a sleek laptop bag, a clear indication of her intent. She saw Elias, looking surprisingly sober and resolute, and Serafina, her pregnant belly prominent, her eyes holding a weary but unwavering strength. "To what do I owe this family reunion?" Lena sneered, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Come to beg for mercy, or just to gloat?" "Lena, stop this," Elias said, his voice calm, devoid of his usual arrogance. "We know what you're doing. We know what you've found." Lena's eyes flickered with surprise, then narrowed. "Oh? And what exactly do you think I've found, Elias? More of your sordid little secrets?" "The gene editing project, Lena," Serafina interjected, her voice clear and steady. "The Boston research, the child. I know you have the emails." Lena froze. Her defiant facade cracked, revealing a flicker of raw panic. She hadn't expected them to know. She had been so careful. "It's over, Lena," Elias continued, his voice firm. "You can't leak it. We have evidence of your unauthorized access to secure servers, your attempts to extort information. My legal team will ensure you face the full consequences." Lena scoffed, a brittle, humorless sound. "Extort? I'm exposing the truth. The world deserves to know what kind of virtuous scientist Serafina Thorne truly is. She's no better than you, Elias. She's a hypocrite, a fraud." "And what does that make you, Lena?" Serafina asked, her voice quiet but piercing. "A purveyor of stolen information? A woman so consumed by bitterness that she would destroy another's life, even if it means destroying her own in the process?" Lena flinched. The words hit home, striking at the core of her shame and anger. "This isn't about me, Lena," Serafina continued, her hand resting protectively on her belly. "This is about an innocent child, a past mistake I have spent years atoning for. If you expose this, you will not only destroy my reputation, but you will open old wounds for a family who has suffered enough. And you will be doing it out of spite, not justice." Elias stepped forward, placing a hand on Serafina's shoulder, a gesture of unexpected solidarity. "We can offer you a way out, Lena. A clean break. We will not pursue legal action for the hacking, and we will provide a severance package that allows you to rebuild your life, away from the spotlight. But you must hand over all the information you've gathered. And you must disappear." Lena looked from Elias to Serafina, her mind racing. The power imbalance had shifted again. She was no longer the one holding the cards. They had anticipated her move, had cornered her. The thought of starting over, away from the relentless scrutiny, away from the public shame, was tempting. But the rage still simmered. "And what about my reputation?" Lena spat. "My career? You two destroyed everything." "You made your choices, Lena," Serafina said, her voice unwavering. "Just as we all did. This is your chance to make a different one, to choose a path that doesn't involve more destruction." The silence stretched, heavy with the weight of Lena's decision. She looked at the laptop bag, then at the resolute faces of Elias and Serafina. The thrill of revenge had been intoxicating, but the reality of its consequences and the strength of their unexpected alliance was undeniable. Finally, with a sigh of defeat, Lena unzipped her bag. "Fine," she muttered, her voice laced with bitterness. "But don't think this makes you innocent, Serafina. Or you, Elias. You're both just better at hiding your sins." She handed over a USB drive, a cold, hard piece of plastic containing the potential ruin of Serafina's life. Elias's security team immediately secured it. Lena then stood, her shoulders slumped, the defiance gone from her eyes, replaced by a profound weariness. She had played her hand, and she had lost. She walked out of the room, not fleeing in public shame this time, but retreating in quiet, private defeat. The immediate crisis averted, Elias and Serafina stood in the empty conference room, a fragile truce hanging between them. The shared crisis had forced them to confront not just Lena, but each other, revealing unexpected layers of vulnerability and a nascent understanding. "Thank you, Elias," Serafina said, her voice soft, "for helping me, for protecting us." Elias nodded, looking at her, a profound sadness in his eyes. "I truly am sorry, Sarah, for everything. I know it's not enough. I know I broke something irreparable." "Yes," Serafina agreed, her gaze meeting his. "You did. But you also showed me something today. A glimpse of the man I once loved, the man who would protect what truly matters." There was no talk of reconciliation, no false promises of a renewed marriage. The betrayal was too deep, the wounds too fresh. But there was a quiet acknowledgement of their shared history and a mutual commitment to the child they would soon welcome. The power imbalance had shifted, not in favor of one over the other, but towards a more equitable, albeit painful, understanding of their individual strengths and weaknesses. The divorce proceedings continued, but with a new, less contentious tone. Elias, stripped of his CEO title but still immensely wealthy, focused on restructuring his life, seeking therapy, and beginning the arduous path of genuine self-reflection. He started a philanthropic foundation dedicated to ethical scientific research, a quiet act of atonement. His redemption was not a grand public gesture, but a slow, painful internal process. Serafina, meanwhile, embraced her new chapter. She published a groundbreaking paper on the ethics of neuroenhancement, subtly drawing on her past experiences without revealing the painful details. She became a vocal advocate for responsible scientific innovation, her voice resonating with a newfound authority and wisdom. Weeks later, in the quiet serenity of a private hospital room, Serafina gave birth to a healthy baby girl. She named her Aurora, after the Roman goddess of dawn, a symbol of new beginnings. Elias was there, at Serafina's invitation, a silent, humble presence. He held his daughter for the first time, a tiny, perfect bundle, and in that moment, the weight of his past mistakes, the public humiliation, the lost empire, all faded into insignificance. This was his true legacy, his one chance at genuine redemption. He looked at Serafina, who watched him with a soft, knowing gaze. There was no love in her eyes, not in the romantic sense, but a deep, shared understanding, a quiet respect forged in the crucible of betrayal and shared crisis. The story was not a fairy tale ending, but a raw, honest portrayal of human fallibility, the devastating consequences of betrayal, and the arduous, often lonely, path to redemption. The characters remained morally complex, their choices driven by a tangled web of ambition, pain, and a desperate search for meaning. The public scandal had been a brutal catalyst, forcing them to confront their deepest flaws, and perhaps to find a fragile dawn amidst the ruins of their shattered lives. What an incredible journey we've taken, hasn't it? From the dazzling heights of Elias Thorne's empire to the shattering public exposure orchestrated by his own pregnant wife, Serafina. We've witnessed the raw pain of betrayal, the corrosive power of hidden motives, and the complex, often contradictory paths characters take when pushed to their limits. Lena Petrova's desperate quest for revenge, fueled by shame and ambition, reminds us that even the wronged can inflict further harm. This story isn't just about infidelity. It's a mirror reflecting the intricate dance of power, vulnerability, and the slow, arduous climb towards redemption. Elias's fall from grace, Serafina's unwavering strength in the face of devastation, and Lena's bitter reckoning all serve as powerful reminders that our choices have far-reaching consequences. And in the end, the birth of Aurora, a symbol of new beginnings, leaves us with a fragile hope that even from the ashes of ruin, a different, more authentic future can emerge. If this story resonated with you, if you felt the emotional shifts and grappled with the moral complexities of these characters, please give this video a like. Share it with someone who appreciates a deep, character-driven drama. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more immersive stories that challenge your perceptions and explore the depths of the human experience. Your support helps us bring these narratives to life. Thank you for watching.